Welcome to Malice and Mystery, where shadows whisper and the unknown beckons. Step into a realm of spine-tingling horror, eerie mysteries, and chilling tales. From real-life paranormal encounters to unsolved enigmas and spine-chilling urban legends, we bring you the darkest stories from the shadows. Subscribe if you dare, and remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved. Terrifying stories from people who were pronounced dead and came back. I bet you thought being dead was really final. Well, today we be counting down the top 10 terrifying stories from people who were pronounced dead and then came back. From a girl who woke up in her coffin to someone who was frozen in an ice lake. Let's get into it. Number 10. The Girl in the Coffin. A funeral home in the Philippines recently came under fire after a dead woman who had been placed inside a coffin woke up before she was buried. According to reports, the woman was identified only as Eleanor, and sadly she had passed away due to complications from COVID. After she passed, her family took her body to the local funeral home to be prepared for burial. But just a few hours after she was placed in the coffin started moving. It was even witnessed by several people. The lid of the coffin was slightly ajar, and when one of the workers went over to close it, the woman opened her eyes. Of course, everyone was totally shocked, but they also realized that this meant that she wasn't actually dead. After being declared dead at the hospital, doctors said that there was nothing they could do for her. So instead, they gave her family two options. They could either take her back home and keep her alive with life support, or let her pass naturally. Sadly, the family chose the latter. And upon realizing their mistake, the funeral home director immediately called the police and told them to come to the building as fast as possible. When the police arrived at the scene, they found the woman still in the coffin, but she had already passed away once more. This time, however, she was handed over to the family without anyone trying to stop them. Truly a nightmare scenario. Number 9. Frozen solid. If you think about it, if someone is frozen, they wouldn't be able to feel anything. Being frozen would definitely be one way to go if you want to be dead. Just ask Roy Walford Sullivan. Sullivan was a man from New Hampshire who was reported missing in January of 2013. The authorities eventually discovered his car at the end of a snowmobile trail near a frozen lake. They then used tracking dogs to search the area, but they couldn't find him anywhere. The next day, a group of volunteers joined the search efforts and they were able to locate Sullivan. He was lying face down in the ice and he was completely frozen solid. He had no pulse, he wasn't breathing, and his heart had already stopped beating. Despite all of this, doctors tried everything they could to save his life, and they even performed open heart surgery on him. At first, it didn't seem like it was going to work, because he didn't regain a heartbeat for a whole hour. But eventually, Sullivan did wake up. He did, however, suffer brain damage as a result of the incident, which left him paralyzed from the waist down. But it's still pretty impressive that he managed to make a full recovery after being frozen solid. Number 8. Dead for 15 minutes. In 2008, doctors at the Rhode Island hospital were faced with a very strange situation. A woman had been brought to the emergency room and they soon discovered that she had no pulse and that she had stopped breathing. She was also missing a few of her vital organs, including her heart, lungs, liver, spleen, and kidneys. Despite this, her brain was still active, and she was even breathing on her own. That's right. The woman had somehow managed to survive without any of the aforementioned organs. So the doctors decided that they needed to perform open heart surgery on her. And in what can only be described as a medical miracle, the surgery was successful. The woman did wake up, but she did have some neurological damage. Still, the fact that she survived it all is nothing short of incredible. It's truly amazing how the human body can adapt to such extreme circumstances. Number 7. Buried alive. In 2014, a boy from Alabama named Bennett was playing outside with his friends when he suddenly collapsed. His friends quickly called for help, but unfortunately, Bennett was later pronounced dead. His family was absolutely devastated, so they couldn't understand why he had died, and they refused to accept the fact that he was gone. so they opted to keep him on life support so they could have more time with him. And this ended up working because after being kept on life support for a week, Bennett was able to make a full recovery. It's unclear exactly what happened to Bennett in the first place, but it's believed that he may have suffered from heat stroke. Regardless, he's lucky to be alive and well today. Number 6. Hanging by a thread. You probably don't need me to tell you that getting hanged is not a good thing. However, in 2012, a teenager from India named Rahul managed to survive after being hanged for 3 minutes. It all happened when he was out playing with his friends. He climbed up onto a tree and then hung himself. And while he was doing this, some of his friends started to make fun of him. He panicked and struggled to free himself from the rope, but he couldn't. Eventually, one of his friends noticed that he was in trouble and called for help. Unfortunately, by the time that help arrived, Rahul had already been hanging for several minutes. His heart had actually stopped beating twice by the time he was taken down. But miraculously, he was eventually able to be revived. He did, however, suffer some brain damage, which left him unable to walk. Number 5. Death by drowning. In July of 2017, a 14-year-old boy from Texas named Jordan was swimming with his friends when he suddenly disappeared underwater. The last thing anyone saw was Jordan jumping off of a diving board. And when he didn't resurface after a few seconds, his friends knew something was wrong. They quickly called for help, but when the police and firefighters arrived at the scene, they couldn't find Jordan anywhere. Eventually, they were able to locate him at the bottom of the pool. He was then rushed to the hospital where he was placed on life support. Miraculously, he was eventually able to be revived and he made a full recovery. While Jordan was lucky to survive this ordeal, it's important to always be careful around water. Number 4. No heartbeat. In 2015, a woman from Australia named Claudia gave birth to her son, Jaden. However, the baby was born prematurely, and he was very sick. He had a hole in his heart, and he was eventually placed on life support. His parents, Matthew and Claudia, were told that their son had no chance of survival. But against all odds, he did end up surviving. In fact, he even went on to live a relatively normal life. There's truly something special about the bond between a mother and her child. And it's clear that Claudia loves her son very much. It's her story, though, that's truly amazing. You see, when Jaden was born, he had no heartbeat. He also wasn't breathing on his own. But despite this, Claudia refused to give up on him. She spent 11 hours giving him mouth-to-nose resuscitation. And eventually, her efforts paid off. Jaden was eventually able to be revived, and he's now a happy and healthy little boy. Number 3. Frigid future. In February of 2011, a man from Alaska named Kyle was snowmobiling with his friends when he suddenly crashed. He was thrown from the snowmobile and he landed on his head. His friends quickly went over to check on him, and they were horrified to find that he had no pulse and that he wasn't breathing. It was freezing cold outside, and Kyle's body temperature dropped to just 136 degrees Fahrenheit. This is significantly below the normal body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite this, Kyle's friends loaded him onto their sled and brought him back to his cabin. One of Kyle's friends began performing mouth-to-nose resuscitation, and this ended up working. Kyle was eventually able to be revived, but he did suffer severe brain damage. Number 2. Brain death. In 2013, a woman from California named Brittany was in a serious car accident. She was rushed to the hospital where it was discovered that she had suffered a severe brain injury. Doctors told her family that she was brain dead, but her family refused to believe this. They felt that Brittany was still alive, and they wanted to keep her on life support so they could spend some more time with her. Eventually, Brittany's brother agreed to donate her organs. However, just moments before her life support was turned off, she opened her eyes. Her family was overjoyed, but doctors told them that she would never recover. Brittany was eventually discharged from the hospital, and she's now living a normal life. Number 1. Buried alive again. We've heard a few cases of people who were buried alive, but how about someone who buried themselves? Well, that's exactly what happened in 2010, when a man from China named Wang ran out of his house in the middle of the night. He was wearing all of his clothes and he had his cell phone with him. He then dug a 6-foot deep hole and buried himself in it. The next morning, his family found him and quickly called for help. He had no pulse and he wasn't breathing. But when doctors examined him, they discovered that he was still alive. Wang had somehow managed to survive 8 hours underground without oxygen. He was eventually able to be revived, but he did suffer brain damage. Thanks so much for watching. It's good. Which of these stories was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales of the mysterious and macabre. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.